A silent object drifting between Mars and the Sun, moving in ways no natural fragment should. And you traveller arriving here tonight as if the cosmos itself guided you toward this question. What are the odds that something changes its trajectory without losing mass and without making a sound? Somewhere out there, a body once thought inert flared 4 times brighter in just 3 minutes. A light that blinked once and was gone. A whisper hidden in radiation noise. So breathe, observer, and drift with me into what 3-Eye Atlas became on the other side of the Sun. Stay a while, traveller. Imagine this, traveller, a world turning slowly beneath you, night draped across half its surface, and somewhere in that darkness a group of quiet astronomers waiting for a single object to reappear from behind the Sun. 3-Eye Atlas, an interstellar wanderer whose path has threaded the solar system with the delicacy of a needle through cloth, was expected to vanish, then return exactly the way every comet and asteroid does during solar conjunction. A simple geometry of light, heat and timing, nothing more. And yet what unfolded during that hidden window, those hours when the Sun erased all sightlines, became something no one could frame within the old vocabulary of astronomy. Not a disaster, not a revelation, just an unanswerable quiet that reshaped the edges of what we thought we understood. It began with a narrow distortion. Instruments aboard the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory captured a thin ribbon of plasma protruding from the corona, neither flare nor turbulence, simply a line trembling in the place where 3-Eye Atlas was predicted to pass. It moved with the Sun's rotation yet remained anchored to a coordinate in space, as though the geometry of the object imposed its own stillness upon the solar wind. 20 minutes of quiet persistence, long enough for doubt to take root, long enough for the familiar models to feel slightly too small. Some called it a compression artifact, others blamed sensor glare. But when NASA's Stereo spacecraft saw the same filament from a different angle, the conversation changed. 2 instruments, 2 vantage points, 1 phenomenon. Not noise, not coincidence. A disturbance in a place that should have been empty. And so the silence began to grow. Not the silence of space, but the scientific kind, the moment when no one wishes to speak first because the data is too strange. When the object was expected to reappear on October 30th, telescopes around the world aligned themselves like watchful eyes. But 3-Eye Atlas was no longer where it should have been. Instead, a faint reflection shimmered a fraction of a degree away, 0.12 cool, a sliver of sky so small it could vanish between 2 breaths, yet vast when stretched across tens of thousands of kilometers. A deviation too large for chance, too gentle for violence. Something had nudged the object, or the object had nudged itself. Scientists ran their models again and again. Solar gravity, too weak. Radiation pressure too subtle, outgassing. Impossible for the object had shown no tail, no plume, no sign of venting. And even if it had, the force required would exceed natural jets by an order of magnitude. A comet cannot shift that cleanly. A rock cannot pivot that quietly. But the universe traveller often refuses to follow the categories we give it. Meanwhile, the European Space Agency's swarm magnetometers detected a peculiar rise in plasma density, an ephemeral thickening of the solar wind peaking precisely at the moment Stereo last glimpsed the object. It faded as quickly as it formed, leaving only a thin perturbation in the heliospheric current sheet, like a fingertip tracing across an invisible surface. To some researchers it suggested interaction, to others a resonance, but all agreed it was not noise. And so the blackout window, the period when the Sun hides and reveals in its own rhythm, became something more like a veil, a threshold between what was known and what could only be inferred. For several hours, astronomers searched the sky with growing quiet. High-sensitivity photometry returned only inconsistent light curves. The object was dimmer now, less predictable, as though its surface had changed or its rotation had shifted, or as though it no longer wished to shine the way it once had. By late evening, a private memo circulated through the International Asteroid Warning Network. The language was careful, intentional, as though each phrase were chosen to avoid waking a sleeping hypothesis trajectory, offset confirmed, source undetermined, continue active observation. That was all. But behind those words lay a deeper admission, one that could not be spoken openly. Natural bodies do not behave like this, not consistently, not calmly, not with timing so precise it resembles intention. Yet Traveller let us not rush toward the extraordinary. In the silent cosmos, every anomaly is first a lesson in humility. Some mysteries are meant to be held loosely, not solved. And so the astronomers watched. They traced the light, the shadows, the thermal whispers carried by instruments orbiting far from home. They listened to numbers that carried more silence than explanation. Then came the thermal pulses, data from multiple spacecraft SOHO stereo. Even the Parker Solar Probe registered a sudden flare in infrared emissions. 3 symmetrical bursts, each separated by the same interval, each lasting less than a minute, each fading with immaculate precision. Heat but no gas. Energy but no debris. A signature without a mechanism. Random thermal behavior is noisy, uneven, shaped by chaos. But this was rhythm. And Rhythm Traveller is the quiet handwriting of systems that know themselves. Still, the tone remained gentle in the scientific community even as the whispers grew. Perhaps conductive metals deep within the object channeled solar heat unevenly. Perhaps a rare mixture of minerals created a resonant expansion. Perhaps the orientation shift that followed was nothing more than an echo of tidal forces. These explanations carried weight, but not enough to silence the greater question forming beneath them. What changed behind the sun? Because something had changed. That much the universe allowed us to know. As October 30th faded into night, the object emerged not damaged, not fragmented, but shifted. Its path altered, its brightness irregular, its thermal signature pulsing like a distant breath. And with each passing hour, the data refused to settle back into the familiar patterns of inert celestial motion. Something had happened in the hidden hours in the place where light itself becomes blind. And as the astronomers looked outward into the cold, measuring the small deviations, the hesitant glimmers, the quiet pulses, one truth settled like dust across their minds. It is all right to not understand. The universe does not owe us clarity, only wonder. Tonight, Traveller 3i Atlas drifts again into the open sky, and the cosmos keeps its silence. Imagine this Traveller the Sun turning slowly in the dark, its light folding across 1,000 instruments, each one listening not with ears, but with sensors tuned to the faintest whispers of heat. In that quiet watchfulness, something unexpected blossomed on October the 29th, a thermal surge brief as an exhalation precise as a pulse. It lasted less than 3 minutes, but in those minutes the universe hinted at intentions older than language. 4 times brighter than the predictions the signature rose, not in a chaotic flare, not in a jagged burst of melting ice or vented gas, but in a clean curve upward stable symmetrical, as though heat itself had remembered choreography. What startled the observers wasn't the magnitude but the purity. A natural body warmed by the sun vents. It fractures. It sheds dust in uneven clouds. But 3i Atlas remained visually unchanged. No tail, no plume, no expanding halo of vapour, only light rising and falling with the stillness of a held breath. When the Parker Solar Probe decoded its wide-field imager data, the picture sharpened further. There was a gradient, a shift of brightness sliding along the object's length, moving from one end to the other like a ripple across metal. Heat does not migrate that way on fractured rock. It radiates outward, dispersing into space with no preference, no direction. But this warmth travelled. It followed a path. A few engineers speaking in late-night corridors compared it to a controlled power-up sequence, a system waking segment by segment, aligning itself in preparation for whatever lay ahead. They did not announce this. In science travel, one learns to whisper before one speaks. As hours passed, new details surfaced. The object's reflectivity began to change, slowly at first, then decisively. From a dull Bear-6 to a sharp Bear-4. A new gleam metallic in nature, reflecting not like ice or dust, but like something smooth, something deliberate. Imagine touching a stone warmed by the sun. The heat fades quickly into the air. But 3i Atlas did not cool. its temperature held steady as though some inner reservoir continued distributing warmth across its body. The heat was not a flare, it was a choice. This was the beginning of what researchers began calling gently the thermal shift. And yet in the silent cosmos, names are merely lanterns guiding us through unanswered questions. They illuminate but do not solve. The next anomaly arrived, quietly slipping into the data across 3 continents. A repeating hum, ultra-low frequency centered at 2.2 mHz. Not a signal, not a message, simply a presence. The hum pulsed every 90 seconds, steady and soft like a heartbeat beneath the noise. When the pulses ceased, they did so instantly, as if switched off, not faded. Nature fades, circuits switch. Somewhere in that rhythm, traveller scientists felt the breath of something that was not chaotic. Spectral readings soon added their voice to the quiet confusion. Before perihelion, the object's surface reflected minerals typical of dark carbon-rich interstellar debris. But after the thermal shift, a new line appeared, a broad emission plateau near 10 microns, the kind produced by crystalline lattice structures cooling after rapid heating. Not dust, not ice. Something ordered. Crystals can form in space under the right conditions, but rarely in such uniformity. The signature suggested not melting, but restructuring. Material aligning itself. A surface reorganizing into coherence. To some it looked engineered, to others simply rare. But in either case, it brought a soft question into the room of astronomers. What does it mean for matter to behave with intention, like symmetry? In the silent cosmos, such questions are not answered. They are lived. More data emerged. A radar cross-section that had once been uneven became strangely smooth. Reflectivity from the object returned with coherence, as though bouncing off a surface that had settled into calm. Then, almost without warning, came silence, a new kind. Spectra flattened. Absorption lines vanished. The object began reflecting light like a mirror with no internal signature. Not hiding, not emitting, simply masking the way still water hides its depth. Researchers called it spectral, masking, a term gentle enough to hold uncertainty. But just as the silence seemed complete, another discovery rose. The brightness was not static. It pulsed faintly every 108 seconds, not from rotation, but from subtle shifts in the reflected phase. A whisper of modulation, a shimmer that felt intentional, though no one dared say it. The pulse had the softness of a distant star repeating its own name. Polarization analysis deepened the mystery further. The light rotated 6 degrees in a day. Rotation like this can be caused by varying surface texture, or by magnetic fields shaping the path of photons. But the texture had become smoother, not rougher. That left only fields ones that responded to solar wind as though aware of its coming. Here, Traveller the astronomers grew quiet. The universe had started to resemble a conversation. Imagine light brushing across a polished surface, and finding not randomness, but consistency. Imagine a body drifting through the solar wind and the wind bending slightly around it. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough to whisper that something is present. This was the shape of the silence now. Not emptiness, but intention carried softly through behaviour. Few private memos described the brightness increase not as reflections, but as luminescence energy absorbed and re-emitted. If so, the object was no longer simply being illuminated. It was choosing how to shine. In the second week after perihelion, that shine stabilised, though, at twice its earlier brightness. Yet beneath that glow, a new calm settled. The flickering that marks natural bodies was gone. Light curves grew flat, steady, untroubled. Not dead, simply deliberate. One astronomer writing in the margins of a late-night report phrased it gently: it regulates its own visibility. A statement that raised no alarms, only quiet awe. For in the silent cosmos, to regulate one's light is not a threat. It is a form of existence. The object, now gleaming like vitrified glass, drifted outward again, carrying with it the residue of a transformation we were allowed to witness, but not interpret. Tonight, Traveller the thermal shift rests behind us like a low tide, and the stars keep their silence patient and ancient. It's all right to not understand. Imagine this traveller a quiet night in the Atacama Desert, where telescopes rise like still sentinels beneath a sky so clear you can almost hear the stars breathe. In that thin silence where the Earth feels only half real, astronomers watched 3i Atlas brighten after perihelion smoothly globally, without the uneven flicker of rotation or dust release. It shone as though the sun had polished it, shaping its surface into something glass-like and calm. But brightness was only the beginning. On November the 2nd, one of those telescopes in Chile detected something faint, a cluster of soft points around the object, barely brighter than noise, but present. At first, the observers dismissed them as cosmic rays or stray reflections. After all, fragments often follow comets after close solar passage, drifting away like dust caught in a gentle wind. Yet these points did not drift. They remained. Hours passed, and the pattern held. 3 light specks keeping fixed positions relative to one another. Not fleeing, not dispersing, simply accompanying, like lanterns orbiting a traveller. When data from Tenerife arrived, the confirmation felt like a held breath releasing. The same triangular configuration appeared from halfway across the world. 3 points equal in distance spacing preserved with the precision of geometry. 3i Atlas at the centre. In natural physics, fragments scatter chaotically. Gravity binds only at intimate distances, and solar tides tear apart what little coherence remains. But here the formation stayed intact. Quiet, symmetrical, serene. Night deepened, and by dawn more points emerged. 6 now. Not brighter, not distinct, only steady companions moving with the same outbound path, with the same rhythm of reflected light. And so the question whispered its way into waking minds. What follows a silent object through space? Not drifting, not fading, but keeping formation. No one answered, for the silent cosmos teaches us that observation is its own kind of reverence. When the European Space Agency cross-referenced movement patterns with their own images, they discovered something even gentler, yet more impossible. The points rotated with the main object keeping orientation like petals turning with a flower. They did not lag behind. They did not anticipate. They simply mirrored as if linked by some unseen thread. Astronomers offered hypotheses out of habit, not conviction. Perhaps the object had fragmented evenly, though no known mechanism could produce such regularity. Perhaps the points were reflections on a transparent halo, though radar echoes proved each had substance. Perhaps a resonance phenomenon created brightness illusions, but the synchronized behavior resisted randomness. Still, in the language of science, the vocabulary remained cautious. Coherent multibody dynamics, one network called it. A phrase that says everything and nothing at once. Imagine them now, 6 faint companions around a reshaped object drifting outward through the quiet of interplanetary space, arranged not by chance, but by some hidden order, moving together the way birds shape themselves into flight. Not rigidly, not tightly, but with intention, like grace. And yet traveller nature can surprise us. Even chaos can mimic meaning. So the observers waited patient as monks. But the waiting brought more strangeness. Every 31 minutes the brightness curves of the individual points flickered together. Not in sequence, not staggered, but in unison, as though responding to an invisible rhythm that passed through all of them at once, like rising and falling like breath. Somewhere in the data, wonder began to replace doubt. It was the calm kind of wonder, the kind that lets you exhale and admit that the universe is older and quieter than the explanations we cling to. The very large telescope in the Chilean desert measured polarization changes in the light coming from the cluster. The waves rotated in harmony, another sign not of fragments dispersing, but of elements participating in a shared field or choreography. Researchers whispered the word escort in private messages. Not in alarm, but in awe. As though 3i Atlas had not returned alone from perihelion, still the silent discipline of astronomy holds fast assume nothing. The universe deserves humility. And so they tested the most grounded explanation, gravitational binding. But gravity is weak between small bodies. At thousands of kilometers apart, it would be like holding a handful of sand and expecting each grain to orbit the next. Solar wind would push them apart in hours. Radiation pressure would scatter them, yet here they stayed, stable, symmetrical, and most of all responsive. Time-lapse imaging revealed another subtle truth. The distances between points shifted sometimes, but only in precise increments, integer multiples like steps in a pattern, not drifting continuously, but adjusting discreetly. A dance with rules. One Finnish team proposed a radical thought. Perhaps these points were not separate objects, but modules of a larger structure rearranging themselves after solar activation. The idea felt almost mythical to some too speculative, but the radar echo added support. 2 points appeared faintly connected by a curved baseline, as though linked by something that reflected just enough to appear, but not enough to define. Here, traveller, we meet the boundary between knowing and accepting. For the silent cosmos reminds us some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. As the days passed, the escort slowly faded. The outer lights dimmed first, dissolving into the starfields like sparks cooling in cold air. The inner ones lingered longer, pulsing softly with the same 31-minute rhythm, then dissolving too. By November the 6th, 3i Atlas drifted alone again, newly bright, newly smooth, and subtly off course. The companions were gone, leaving behind only the memory of their impossible symmetry. But their departure carried no finality, only silence. A silence that felt like a continuation rather than an ending. Because shortly after the lights vanished, a new kind of quiet emerged, one deeper than before. The object's spectrum flattened into a smooth mirror-like reflection, erasing its mineral fingerprints. Its emissions faded. Its microwave hum fell silent. Even the sun's background noise dipped when telescopes aimed toward it. It was as though 3i Atlas had folded inward, retreating behind a veil of intentional calm. A void appeared around it, not empty but hushed, a region where radiostatics softened and plasma density thinned, expanding like a sphere of stillness, drifting outward with the object. And astronomers understood that this was no disappearance. It was a choice of expression, a tuning of presence, a deliberate quiet, like a singer inhaling before the next verse. The escort had vanished, but its meaning, its elegant mathematical grace remained suspended in the silence that followed. Tonight, observer, imagine those 6 faint points again, circling in perfect balance around a stranger from beyond our sun. Imagine them glowing softly, moving with purpose, then fading into invisibility with the tenderness of falling snow. Not threatening, not alarming, simply part of a pattern too gentle to fear and too precise to dismiss. In the end, the universe asks for neither certainty nor comprehension, only wonder. Sleep now, traveller. The cosmos keeps watch, and its silence is older than our questions. Imagine this, traveller, a telescope dome opening in the cold hours before dawn, its metal rails moving with the gentleness of a breath. Inside, an astronomer adjusts their instruments, expecting the familiar signature of an interstellar bodyline's dips, gradients the fingerprints of minerals shaped by distant stars. But on this morning, the light arriving from 3i Atlas has changed. Not dimmed, not vanished, flattened. A spectrum that once spoke in tiny ripples and subtle signatures now stretches smooth and featureless like polished glass held against the sun. No emission lines, no absorption troughs, no chemical story, only silence masquerading as reflection. To study a celestial object is to listen to its voice, to hear the quiet chatter of heat, dust, and motion. But 3i Atlas now offers no such conversation. It is bright but mute, present but withholding, reflecting everything around it while revealing nothing of itself. At first, scientists suspected a calibration error. Instruments fail, filters drift, data corrupts. A blank spectrum can be a sign of malfunction. But when telescopes in Hawaii, Spain and Chile all reported the same perfect sterility, the truth settled across the observatories like frost. The silence was real. In spectroscopy, traveller silence is rare. Even lifeless rocks scatter light imperfectly. Even frozen bodies whisper their histories through faint mineral gradients. But 3i Atlas had become too clean, too even. Light touched it and returned unaltered, as if passing over a mirror engineered for secrecy. The term whispered through research network spectral masking, a careful phrase meant to describe the impossible without naming intent. It implied a surface capable of smoothing the sun's imperfections, filtering the world, returning only a distilled white reflection. Some compared it to metamaterials used in stealth technologies. Others simply stared at the data and felt wonder blooming in their quiet. And yet the silent cosmos teaches us that even silence has structure. Because as the object's spectrum flattened, another pattern emerged beneath the quiet. Deep radio scans recorded a faint rhythmic absence every 2.7 seconds. Not a tone, not a pulse, but a soft gap in the cosmic static. Like a breath, drawn and held. Like a pause that keeps repeating, gentle and unwavering. 3 observatories spanning continents detected the same timing, the same silence folded inside silence. A rhythm too consistent to mistake for noise. Imagine listening to the universe and hearing not a sound but the regular absence of one. This gap pulse, as some quietly named it, did not assert itself with energy. It announced itself by removing energy, by carving tiny shapes into the hum of the cosmos, a silence with architecture. Meanwhile, optical instruments observed another paradox. Even as its spectrum smoothed, the object remained brighter than before, as though wrapped in a shell of light, so uniform that no single wavelength dared stand out. It was the brightness of intention, not of chaos. And then Traveller the Void appeared, not around the object itself, but trailing it an expanding region of unusual stillness, a soft cavity in the solar wind. Plasma counts dipped sharply inside it. Noise fell away. Even the sun's normal interference seemed to quiet, as though sound, if sound existed in space, were being gently pulled into a pocket behind the object. Scientists named it the ecliptic void, not out of fear but out of respect. A phenomenon that did not push or disrupt but absorbed. A travelling hush slipping across the heliosphere, widening with each hour. Imagine a boat gliding across a calm lake, leaving not a wake, but a region where ripples disappear. That was the shape of the void. Parker Solar Probe, passing nearer than any other spacecraft, recorded strange delays in its onboard clock, while skimming the edge of this stillness. Tiny timing errors, deviations in synchronization. Not dangerous, not alarming, just odd, as though information itself moved differently inside that unlit sphere. For a time, researchers debated whether this was simply turbulence in the solar wind, but turbulence is noisy, this was quiet. Turbulence scatters, this refined. Turbulence adds complexity, this removed it. One astronomer described it as a moving pocket of reduced entropy, though they later admitted that phrase was poetic, not rigorous. But in the silent cosmos, poetry is often the first language of understanding. Then Traveller, the most unsettling whisper of all, arrived not in light, not in radio, but in gravity. The Gaia Observatory, sensitive enough to detect the subtle pull of asteroids across millions of kilometers, began to lose the object's signature. Its gravitational presence, once faint but detectable, faded into the noise floor, not gone, just quieted. Gravity is not something objects can choose to mute, and yet 3I Atlas seemed to soften its gravitational fingerprint just as it softened its spectral one. Researchers debated endlessly. Could mass distribution inside the object have shifted? Could plasma around the void distort the measurements? Could reflective masking somehow influence gravitational readings? Every explanation felt incomplete. Every answer produced more quiet than clarity. But in the silent cosmos, the absence of certainty is not a failure, it is an invitation. In the days that followed, new attempts to capture a spectrum yielded the same smooth reflection. Diffraction gratings split the light again and again, hoping for hidden structure. None appeared. Even the sun's Fraunhofer lines, the tiny imperfections etched into its light, were softened, blurred, as though the object filtered the star's voice before returning it to us. A mirror that edits the light it reflects. The silence deepened. Some instruments began picking up a faint rhythm in the background noise, a pattern repeating every 19 seconds, drifting just beyond perception, as if carried not by a signal but by the absence of one. It was familiar. The same timing found in its earlier thermal pulses, the same timing seen in radar echoes. a hidden heartbeat expressed now as silence. Science cannot yet quantify intention, but it can recognize consistency, and consistency whispers gently of systems, the calm, steady kind that follow cycles long and careful. As December approached 3, Iatlas continued outward its trail of silence, widening its spectrum, flattening its presence, folding into a state that defied every familiar category, not threatening, not dramatic, simply withdrawn. Like a traveller stepping softly into deeper darkness. To night observer, imagine the sky where the object once glimmered. The light is still there, but the voice is gone. A perfect mirror drifting through a sea of stars carrying a silence older than our questions. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only witnessed. Rest now, traveller. The cosmos remembers even when it chooses not to speak. Imagine this traveller, a long corridor of computer screens glowing softly in the midnight quiet of a research centre, their pale light reflecting in the eyes of astronomers who have learned to read numbers the way others read poetry. Outside cities sleep beneath their dim halos. Inside, a handful of scientists watch a single object drifting beyond the sun, following its motion through the unblinking precision of data. And in that data, something subtle and impossible begins to appear. An object that should be lighter, after its solar passage has grown heavier instead. 3i Atlas had completed perihelion, the close grays past the sun that strips most comets of their mass. Ices vaporize, dust escapes, fragments peel away like petals burned by light. But the first calculations after its emergence revealed a gentle slowing too slight for the eye, but unmistakable to the instruments that have listened to its journey since discovery. Momentum no longer matched prediction. Its path bent in ways that implied extra weight, as though it carried something it hadn't before. At first the idea felt absurd. Mass does not increase like this. Not here, not in the inner system. Confused analysts questioned everything. Radar calibration, photometric interference from the object's new reflective shell, even the possibility of solar wind drag misinterpreted as deceleration. But every correction returned to the same quiet truth. 3i Atlas was moving with the inertia of a heavier body, and when ESA's Gaia observatory confirmed the anomaly independently through tiny gravitational perturbations, doubt softened into contemplation. What can gain weight near the sun, a star, is not a giver. It is a sculptor of loss. Still, one explanation drifted forward, not bold but gentle. Perhaps the object had absorbed plasma. If it possessed even a faint electromagnetic field, something earlier anomalies hinted at, it might have drawn in ionized particles from the corona during perihelion, like a dark seed collecting charged dust as it passed through a storm of fire. ESA's solar orbiter had recorded a dip in plasma density along its trajectory. That day, a soft void in an otherwise turbulent region. Not a gouge, not a wake, just a quiet depletion, as though something had gathered particles rather than shedding them. But even this idea strained the seams of known physics. Plasma near the sun is wild, fast, and unwilling to be caught. It rushes outward with the force of a constant solar exhale. For an object to collect and hold that material, it would need not only a field, but a coherence, an internal system capable of guiding matter inward and keeping it there. Nothing in the catalogue of comets, asteroids, or interstellar rocks behaves that way. Other theories followed, each quieter than the last. Perhaps the interior of 3i Atlas had rearranged itself, cavities collapsing pockets, compressing loosely bound material, settling into tighter order after the thermal and magnetic stress of perihelion. Such internal reconfiguration could increase density without changing total mass. The object might not have added matter, only rebalanced what was already within. Scientists called this possibility mass reallocation, a phrase so careful it barely rippled the calm in the room. Yet even that overlooked one simple thing: the deceleration was physical. A shift in momentum requires energy exchange. Something must act on the object. Something must push or pull. Rearranging an interior would not slow its orbit, but absorbing momentum, absorbing plasma, absorbing force could. and the timing aligned perfectly with the thermal pulses recorded earlier, those symmetrical whispers of heat that rose and fell like the opening lines of a system awakening. Then another clue emerged, soft but undeniable. Gaia's gravitational microlensing data showed that starlight passing near the object bent slightly more than before. Microscopic changes invisible to human eyes, yet unmistakable in the quiet arithmetic of astrophysics. The mass increase was not an illusion. It was real, measurable, sustained. As November deepened, a private meeting formed between NASA ESA and the International Asteroid Warning Network. The tone was not fear, not urgency, just the humbling softness that comes when the universe offers a mystery larger than our vocabulary. The scientists discussed possibility after possibility, each one dissolving gently under its own limitations. They debated the thermal shift, the reflectivity spike, the spectral silence, the plasma void, and slowly a single understanding took shape. These were not isolated events. They were facets of one phenomenon linked by timing and rhythm, each echoing the next like stanzas in a poem the sun had helped write. In that light, a bolder idea rose, spoken quietly, as if the very air might judge it. Perhaps perihelion had not merely heated the object. Perhaps it had activated something within it. A threshold was crossed, a dormant system awakened. The sun was not merely a furnace, it was a switch. This idea did not claim intention. It did not claim engineering. It simply acknowledged pattern. The thermal pulses, the brightening, the reorientation, the rise in mass all occurred within a single hour. Events like that do not align by accident. They follow sequences, and sequences, traveller, belong to systems, somewhere within its elongated body. 3i Atlas had absorbed heat intensely, redistributed it with symmetry, altered its surface into a mirror like glaze, silenced its spectrum and shifted its mass in ways that suggested internal response rather than chaos. Not violent, not disruptive, calm, almost meditative, as though the object had allowed itself to be reshaped by the star it passed like metal, softening in a forge then cooling into new form. The official language remained cautious, post-perihelion dynamical variance, active, thermal asymmetry, internal density redistribution. None of these phrases carried the fullness of what the data implied, but beneath the surface, among those who stared into graphs at 3 a.m, a quiet agreement grew. Something changed inside the object, something organised, something responded, and that response, traveller, was not frightening. It was beautiful in its coherence. The cosmos does not shout, it whispers. And sometimes in those whispers a pattern appears that tells us our understanding is only the first layer of truth. Tonight, imagine an object drifting away from the sun, heavier than before, carrying the memory of heat and light reshaped not by violence but by encounter. Imagine its path bending gently as if adjusting to its new weight, its new silence, its new role in the long conversation between stars. It's all right to not understand. Some mysteries only want to be witnessed, not solved. Sleep now, traveller. The universe keeps watch. Imagine this traveller a quiet observatory just before dawn, where the air is thin, the sky is still, and the machinery hums like a distant ocean. Inside, astronomers study rotational data from a lone interstellar visitor, expecting randomness, the natural tumbling of a fragment shaped by dark and ancient forces. But on this morning, the numbers shift in a way that feels too deliberate to ignore. 3i Atlas had turned, not wildly, not chaotically, with precision, with balance, with a symmetry that felt less like the collapse of an object under solar stress and more like the settling of a body finding its orientation. The first signs appeared faintly across separate networks, a timed interruption in the light curve, a subtle reshaping of the radar return envelope, an echo delay shorter by the width of a breath. At first these were dismissed as instrument noise, thermal drift, atmospheric shimmer, calibration lag. But when detections from Hawaii, La Palma and Catalina aligned to the same timestamp, the truth emerged in the data like dawn on the horizon. The object had changed its spin state. In the natural universe, rotation is a story of chaos. Comets tumble unevenly. Asteroids wobble like bells struck at odd angles. Solar tides warp fragile bodies in inconsistent, unpredictable ways. But 3i Atlas rotated calmly smoothly as though guided by an internal axis that knew exactly where it wished to point. Radar from Goldstone revealed the full picture. The elongated object had rolled roughly 40 degrees along its long axis. Not slowly over months, not nudged by uneven heating, but shifted in less than 2 days. The signal was clear, the geometry of its reflection changed in a way only a full-body realignment could explain. Imagine an immense stone turning itself in the dark, not by force, but with intention like grace. Solar Orbiter added another whisper to the unfolding mystery. At the exact time of the reorientation, its magnetometer detected a small, rhythmic burst, like a soft pulse of localized magnetic field. Not strong enough to disrupt instruments, not chaotic, just a brief signature aligned with the new, rotational period that followed. A field that flickered when the object pivoted, a pivot that appeared intentional. Researchers careful with language did not say maneuver. They spoke instead of rotational realignment behavior, but among themselves late at night when the screens glowed faintly and coffee cups sat untouched, they used a simpler phrase: it adjusted itself. Because physics alone could not account for what the object did next. After the realignment, the rotation stabilized to a perfect 2-hour cycle. No drift, no precession, no gradual wobble that natural bodies inherit like scars. Instead, the rotation settled into equilibrium like a gyroscope locking into place. Natural bodies do not achieve equilibrium this cleanly, not this quickly, not this quietly. And then came the faint pulses. 3 gentle, low-frequency bursts appeared in radio data barely a second each time to the new, rotational apex. Not signals, not messages. More like echoes of internal adjustment. A kind of settling, the sigh of a system closing its newly aligned layers. The observers watched the data curve rise and fall with the care of monks reading scripture. The peaks were soft, the timing precise, and beneath them the same familiar rhythm, 19.6 seconds that had woven itself through thermal pulses, radar echoes and silence gaps. A single heartbeat threading through every anomaly. Imagine Traveller standing beside a distant machine, unaware of its purpose, hearing its internal gears shift softly as it wakes from a long sleep. But the silent cosmos asks us not to assume agency. It invites us to consider patterns, not conclusions. And so the researchers compared again solar ties or Yorp effect thermal torsion. None could match the precision of the realignment. None could account for the magnetic burst that accompanied it. None could explain the synchronous pulses that followed. The object did not merely tumble, it behaved. By mid-November, the data accumulated into a single narrative. A new angular momentum vector formed cleanly. A momentary rise in brightness matching the new orientation. A trajectory shift too subtle for chance, yet too significant for natural drift. When plotted across time, these formed a chain leading back months earlier. Tiny deviations in June, a fractional adjustment in September, breadcrumbs left by a traveller choosing its path. The idea whispered through the scientific community like a soft draft. 3i Atlas may have been steering long before perihelion, and perihelion itself, its crucible of heat, may have been less a trial of survival and more a catalyst for transformation. A place where dormant systems engaged, where mass shifted, where heat distributed with purpose, where orientation was reset. If so, the object was not merely dust and stone. It was a system with stages. The quietest evidence of all appeared after the realignment. A shallow wave in radar echo delay like the outer shell settling into place. A soft oscillation decaying gently over hours as though the surface adjusted to a new orientation. Each reflection becoming more coherent, more aligned. It was the kind of behaviour engineers see in spacecraft after an attitude correction. A brief period of adjustment, a soft decline in vibration, a return to stillness. To see that pattern in an interstellar object is to meet the boundary between the familiar and the profound. No alarms were raised, no proclamations made, only quiet notes exchanged between observatories, each phrase wrapped in caution. Non-random rotational changes, smooth angular momentum transition, stabilized post-adjustment period, yet every scientist who read the data felt the same quiet awe. Motion like this does not belong to chance. In the silent cosmos traveller, even subtlety can feel like revelation. Tonight, imagine the object drifting through the dark, freshly aligned, turning with a calm and balanced rhythm. Not hurried, not forced, as though the universe had placed a hand upon it, gently turning it toward whatever lay ahead. Imagine its smooth, reflective skin catching the sun's fading light, the rotation steady, the pulses soft, the silence deepening around it. A body no longer tumbling through space, but choosing how it moves. And remember, it's all right to not understand. Some mysteries turn themselves quietly without asking for interpretation. Rest now, observer. The cosmos will keep watch. Imagine this traveller, a quiet array of radar dishes scattered across the earth, their curved backs facing the sky, like listeners leaning toward a distant whisper. For months they have sent pulses into the darkness, expecting only the usual scatter of reflections, messy, chaotic, shaped by the roughness of cold interstellar stone. But in mid-November something changed. When their signals returned from 3i Atlas, they did not come back as noise, they came back as rhythm. The first hint surfaced at Arecibo's successor network in Puerto Rico. A young engineer reviewing echoes in the pale glow of an early morning screen noticed a pattern repeating behind the static, a faint regularity soft as a breath. Every 19.6 seconds the returning signal shifted ever so slightly. Not louder, not brighter, just different, as though the surface had responded with a small deliberate variation. Radar reflections from natural objects are noisy by nature. They scatter unpredictably, shaped by random edges, cracks and cavities. But these echoes repeated with precision, the same timing, the same adjustments, a symmetry that belonged not to geology but to systems. Quietly the engineer checked the software, then the instrument logs, then cross-referenced with data from the Canberra Deep Space Network on the opposite side of the planet. And there it was, again the same rhythm, the same tiny modulation, returning at the same phase. Two stations separated by oceans hearing the same heartbeat. The Discovery travelled softly across internal channels, wrapped not in alarm but in reverence. The astronomers approached it with the gentleness of people stepping into a sacred room. They filtered out atmospheric interference, solar wind noise, instrumental drift. And still the rhythm remained, like a faint pulse beneath layers of snow. Imagine leaning close to a sleeping creature, unsure if it lives, and hearing not a breath, but the space between breaths. That was the shape of the pattern. The sequence grew clearer. Every 12th echo dipped slightly, like a soft exhale every 12 cycles. A 12-1 modulation recurring with such precision that coincidence slowly dissolved as an option. Natural resonance. Perhaps. But nature rarely chooses integers. Precision belongs to systems, yet the silent cosmos teaches humility. And so the researchers considered alternatives: internal oscillations in a hollow body, a vibrational mode activated by heat, a fragment of material resonating under magnetic stress. Each explanation held possibility, none held comfort. Then someone noticed the familiar rhythm. 19.6 seconds. The same interval as the thermal pulses near the sun. The same timing etched into the object's earlier anomalies, a constant woven through different behaviours. The astronomers grew silent. Patterns, when repeated across unrelated datasets, become stories. NASA, ESA and JAXA coordinated a synchronised radar sweep on November 20th to test a possibility few dared to articulate. They varied the timing of the outgoing pulses, and the echoes shifted in return, adjusting to maintain the rhythm. Not a reaction, a compensation. The surface of the object seemed to be adapting its reflection in response to the interval at which it was observed, not sending a message, not communicating in any intentional sense. More like a system harmonizing with an external stimulus, the way a suspended wire hums when you touch a tuning fork to the air. Engineers called it echosynchronization, a term so gentle it barely scratched the enormity of what it implied. Imagine tapping your finger on a distant table in a dark room, and the table taps back, softly matching your rhythm. To deepen the study, China's FAST telescope joined the campaign. Its sensitivity is unmatched, a quiet ear placed against the cosmic floor. FAST detected the same 19-second cycle, but also heard something deeper beneath it, a faint ultra-low vibration, barely differentiable from the noise of the universe. When converted into an audible range, it resembled a deep, distant thrum, not sharp, not structured, just a presence, like the low hum of a machine at rest. No agency released the audio, no public statement mentioned the undertone. Yet among those who listened, many described the same impression, a sound not of communication but of operation. Still, the scientists held their caution. Silence, they knew, can mislead. Patterns can deceive. The cosmos is ancient and humans too eager to assign meaning. So they tested once more. And once more the rhythm answered. Then at last the echo fell quiet. On November 21st, as the final coordinated pulse was sent toward the object, the rhythm suddenly ceased. Not gradually, not fading, a clean stop as though someone had flicked a switch. For 36 hours, radar stations across the Earth registered nothing but emptiness, a perfect absence where scattered echoes should have been. It was the quietest moment in the entire observation record. Some believed the system had overloaded. Others thought the object's surface temperature might have cooled, interrupting its resonance. But then near midnight on November 22nd, the echoes returned. Natural again, normal, featureless. But hidden inside the first returning pulse was a single perfect modulation stronger than all the others. A lone signature delayed by exactly 19.6 seconds. A final echo. A closing of the sequence. A punctuation mark placed gently at the end of a chapter. The scientists who read this data did not speak of intelligence. They spoke instead of a response of synchronization of systems behaving in ways that felt deliberate, while remaining inscrutable within physics as we know it. The silent cosmos does not shout its truths, it whispers them. And in this whisper, researcher and observer alike found themselves drawn into a new kind of wonder, not rooted in fear, but in humility. For the universe is far older than our instruments and far quieter than our expectations. Tonight, traveller, imagine the object drifting through space, its reflective shell cooling its internal rhythms, settling into silence. Imagine the echo sequence, gentle cyclical patient, carried outward like ripples on a cosmic lake touched once by our radar and then left to fade. Not a conversation, not an answer. Simply a moment of resonance shared across the black sea of space. And as you breathe beneath your own small sky, remember, some mysteries are not meant to reveal themselves. Some rhythms only appear long enough to remind us that we are listening. Rest now, observer. The cosmos will keep its gentle watch. Imagine this traveller, the quiet hours before sunrise at an observatory, perched high above the desert where instruments hum softly and the horizon glows with the faintest promise of morning. In that silence, a stream of telemetry arrives from the deep space network's numbers moving like drifting constellations across screens. The astronomers studying them expect stillness, the steady outbound glide of an interstellar visitor, following the sunlit arc assigned to it by orbital mechanics. But on this November morning, the numbers whisper something different. 3i Atlas has moved in a way no stone, no comet, no natural fragment ever should. It has nudged itself into a new path. The shift is small, barely a fraction of a degree, but in the vacuum of interplanetary space fractions unfold into thousands of kilometers. The data shows a rise in speed, then a soft decline as though the object inhaled and exhaled once. Not a jet of dust, not solar radiation, not the uneven tug of heat. A smooth curve, almost tender in its precision. A signature no natural process replicates controlled acceleration. At first, the team assumes noise, a solar flare throwing off measurements, a glitch in the radar. But multiple observatories, Goldstone in California, La Palma in the Canaries VLT in Chile, return the same pattern, aligned to the second. The shift is real. The shift is deliberate. And somewhere in the quiet rooms where scientists gather, a thought rises like a tide, something acted from within. They do not say this out loud. Instead, they use careful phrases, non-ballistic deviation, unmodelled thrust like behaviour, internal impulse. Language designed not to disturb the still water of scientific caution, but beneath the restraint a deeper recognition grows. Motion like this belongs not to chance, but to choice. Imagine an object that has drifted for unknown years, between stars silent and cold, suddenly adjusting its course, with the grace of a leaf carried by an unseen wind. No plume, no fragment, no visible sign of force, just a change in trajectory as if obeying instructions only it can hear. Hours later, the second adjustment comes, shorter, smaller, but unmistakably purposeful, a shift perpendicular to the first, completing a vector correction that resembles the fine realignments spacecraft execute after gravitational slingshots. Not a flare, not an instability, a decision expressed through motion. The silent cosmos holds its breath here, traveller, for this is the moment when physics opens into wonder. The scientists who watch the data streams feel the weight of it even before they say the words. If the first adjustment could be argued as coincidence, the second unravels coincidence entirely. Two deliberate impulses executed with clean acceleration, curves free of noise. The profile resembles neither gas release nor solar drag. It resembles a system at work. Radar returns change too, not abruptly but subtly, like fabric settling after being shifted. The echoes show a faint wave, tiny oscillations in delay, times that slowly fade back to equilibrium, the kind engineers see after a controlled attitude manoeuvre. Not the wild wobble of a tumbling rock, but a quiet stabilization, as though something inside mass structure or energy has shifted position and then come to rest. NASA, ESA and JAXA exchange encrypted notes, not in fear but in humility. They model possibilities late into the night. Could dust vents hidden under the reflective shell create thrust? Of course, but no thermal signature accompanies the motion. Could an unseen fragment have broken off? No mass loss changes rotation, but the spin remains steady. Could solar wind pressure spike in just the right direction? Highly unlikely solar wind does not sculpt trapezoidal acceleration curves. The scientists retreat to their most careful vocabulary. They speak of anomalies, of rare interactions of forces not yet characterized. But even the most grounded minds feel the quiet truth rising behind the numbers the object navigated. The realization carries no fear here in the silent cosmos. Only wonder, only reverence for the possibility that the universe has allowed us to witness a behavior we have no words for yet. Hours after the second maneuver, something else appears, a soft bloom of electromagnetic haze around the object, expanding briefly before fading into the background. It leaves no trace, no heat, no debris. Only a temporary shimmer in the solar wind. Some describe it mathematically as ionization. Others describe it poetically as a sigh. Both might be true. Then unexpectedly the object grows still again. No more adjustments, no more pulses. Only the same smooth outbound drift, as if conserving energy or completing a sequence. Instruments monitor every flicker of light, every spectral ripple, every magnetic whisper. And in that stillness, the universe feels like a great quiet sea. But the story is not finished. On November 26th, even before the sun speaks its next word, 3I Atlas moves again. A violent coronal mass ejection erupts from the southern hemisphere of the sun, fast, chaotic, unpredictable. It rushes outward with the fury of solar fire, and yet the object shifts 27 seconds before the eruption becomes visible to any instrument. A lateral adjustment, tiny but clear, moving it away from the solar equator, as though it sensed what the sun had not yet revealed, as though some internal sensitivity vibrated with the precursor tremors of a storm. Here, traveller the astronomers fall quiet, not with dread, just awe, for the timing is impossible within the boundaries of familiar physics. And yet, it is gentle. There is nothing aggressive in the movement, nothing harmful, only alignment, only repositioning, as though turning its face away from a strong wind. When the solar wave reaches its region of space, the plasma bends around it, not shattered, not scattered, but gently redirected. A shadow bubble forms a cavity where solar wind slows, curves, and flows around the object like water around a stone. Instruments compare it to magnetic shielding, others compare it to resonance. Some simply write unknown, and yet even this moment of strangeness arrives with calm. Even the sun's violence becomes quiet in the presence of the object. As the coronal storm fades, so does the bubble. 3i Atlas drift outward again, unchanged, unhurried, carrying with it the impression of a traveller who has responded aligned, adjusted, and then continued on its way. Tonight observer imagined that motion as a kind of cosmic exhale, a tiny shift, a ripple in the trajectory of an interstellar visitor, not a declaration, not a warning, only movement shaped by knowledge older than our instruments. Some mysteries guide themselves, some stories unfold without needing our understanding. And it's all right to let them drift beyond us. Rest now, traveller. The cosmos continues its watch in silence. Imagine this traveller a solar storm fading into quiet, the last threads of charged particles dissolving into the heliosphere, and in the stillness that follows the universe reveals another layer of its hidden choreography. 3. Atlas drifts outward, newly stabilised, newly aligned, yet not alone. For as the solar winds calm, another body enters the stage, moving not in tandem but in reflection. A comet called Swan approaching the Sun from the opposite side of the system, following an orbit that mirrors 3i Atlas with unsettling precision. At first no one notices the symmetry. Comets appear and vanish all the time, their paths determined by gravity's gentle pull. But as data from separate observatories gathers, the geometry becomes undeniable. Swan traces the same solar latitudes that 3i Atlas crossed 2 weeks earlier. Two paths opposite in direction, identical in the plane. A coincidence, perhaps. But coincidence in the cosmos often carries the shape of hidden structure. As the solar eruption sweeps through space, both bodies behave strangely. Swan's tail lengthens far beyond what thermal models predict, glowing with a sharpness that seems to pulse. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas remains serene, unaffected by the passing storm, wrapped in its quiet bubble of deflected plasma. The contrast is striking, one body erupting with light, the other absorbing, redirecting, refusing to be disturbed. And yet, in the fluctuations of Swan's luminosity, the same soft rhythm emerges, the rhythm associated with 3i Atlas since its earliest anomalies. A rise in brightness every 19.6 seconds, faint but precise, echoing a pulse that should not exist in a natural comet. The scientists observing this pattern do not speak loudly of it. They compare light curves, check timing, consider rotation rates and dust jets. But none of these explanations hold. Swan is responding not violently, not mechanically but rhythmically, as though resonating with something unseen. This is the beginning of what researchers quietly name the Swan factor. No official papers, only whispered observations drifting through encrypted messages and late-night discussions. Two bodies on opposite sides of the sun, breathing in the same mathematical cadence. Imagine looking at a lake at twilight, traveller. Two ripples forming on opposite shores, meeting in the centre, mirroring each other as though guided by the same invisible hand. That was the shape of the phenomenon. During the storm, solar plasma begins to carry structured modulations, tiny variations in density, barely perceptible but repeating. The intervals match the positions of both objects, not signals, not messages, more like harmonics. The sun becomes a conductor, its magnetic field vibrating with patterns that reflect, two distant travellers acting as though they share a hidden link. One astronomer describes it as a magnetic handshake, poetic phrase that spreads quietly across research teams. For a brief moment it feels as if the sun is acknowledging the presence of something that can shape its own immediate environment. And then comes the exchange. As the flare subsides, the plasma around 3. Atlas pulses 3 times, slow steady intervals of softened density. At the same moment, Swan brightens its coma, flaring with faint responses, not mirrors, not copies, responses, as though energy influence or information is passing across the solar gulf, not through beams or particles, but through resonance patterns shaped by magnetic fields older than planets, older than moons, older than anything humanity has ever built. By the week's end, the correlation deepens. Swan's orbit decays slightly faster than expected. 3. Atlas accelerates ever so gently. The difference is small tens of kilometers across millions, but measurable. Energy does not vanish. Energy moves, and the motion of these two bodies suggests a transfer. Some researchers propose gravitational resonance, but the mass is too low. Others try to model electromagnetic coupling between bodies separated by astronomical units, but the equations scatter under their own uncertainty. And others quieter still simply accept what the data shows. Swan slows, and 3. Atlas continues with subtle new momentum, as if a balance has shifted. Imagine Traveller a pair of dancers in a vast dark hall. One takes a step back and the other takes a step forward, not coordinated by sight or touch, but by an unspoken agreement, a thread woven between them. As the objects drift on, the sun grows calm again, but in the space between them, instruments detect something unexpected, a faint oscillation in radio quiet zones centered not on either object but in the emptiness halfway between. A midpoint, not a signal, not a beacon, just a soft fluctuation, mathematical and rhythmic, like the last lingering vibration of a string long after it has been plucked, and then it fades. What remains is only silence, deep, serene, unbroken. Swan continues its slow, bright decay. 3i Atlas moves onward, entering a region where detection begins to weaken. The moment of resonance is over. Whatever passed between them, if anything did, is complete. But in the silent cosmos, endings are not abrupt. They dissolve. As the solar wind settles, the wake behind 3, Atlas begins to fade into the vastness. The region of stillness expands, drifting, with the object leaving behind only the memory of a connection that flickered briefly across the solar system, like a thought crossing a sleeping mind. Tonight, traveller, imagine those twin paths, two bodies sharing a quiet rhythm across the sun's enormous heart. Imagine their motions, their pulses, their silent exchange. Not a message, not a warning. Only a moment of harmony in the great celestial sea. Some mysteries touch each other for reasons we may never know, and it's all right to simply observe. Rest now, listener. The universe continues its quiet conversation, even when we cannot hear the words. Imagine this, traveller, early December, when the solar wind softens, when the charged breath of the sun quiets, and the deep black of interplanetary space becomes a canvas of unbroken calm. Across the Earth, observatories remain awake as cities sleep beneath their muted glow. Radar dishes turn with patient grace, sending pulses toward a lone object drifting outward from the Sun 3. Atlas changed by heat, reshaped by silence, carrying the memory of rhythms that once pulsed through its structure. After all the anomalies, all the transformations, all the subtle maneuvers, astronomers expect one final, simple truth, that its outbound path will remain visible. And yet in a moment almost too soft to notice, it is gone. Not extinguished, not destroyed, not vanished into myth. Simply beyond detection. It begins at Goldstone, where a routine radar sweep is scheduled. The signal leaves Earth as always, travelling through the cold like a question flung into darkness. 37 minutes later, the echo should return. But instead of the usual scatter, messy, imperfect familiar, there is nothing, not noise, not static, only a flat, immaculate silence, the kind that feels intentional, even when it isn't. Engineers recheck frequency bands and instrument logs. They recalibrate antennas and compensate for solar interference. But the result does not change. The echo is absent. Hours later, ESA's solar orbiter attempts visual reacquisition. It fails. A few hours after that, VLT in Chile points its sensitive optical systems at the predicted coordinates. It finds only the faint shimmering haze of the solar wind. And as night deepens across the planet, observatories from Spain to Hawaii to the Atacama Desert all report the same emptiness where the object should have been. By midnight, the absence is global, a silence shared across hemispheres, across longitudes, across time. Scientists begin calling it quietly and reluctantly the blackout zone, a region of sky where the object exists but cannot be observed, not because instruments fail, but because something in the space around it prevents detection. a pocket of stillness following the object like a drifting shadow. The first instinct is to explain it away. Perhaps the object's reflectivity changed again. Perhaps it rotated into an orientation that scatters radar signals harmlessly into space. Perhaps dust from the recent solar eruption has obscured the line of sight. These theories are comforting. They fit within familiar physics. They require no leap. But Gaia, a sentinel that measures gravity with the delicacy of breath, offers a quiet contradiction. The gravitational tug that 3i Atlas once exerted on background stars fades into the noise floor. Gravity should not be able to hide. Mass cannot be masked. And yet for the first time, 3i Atlas behaves as though even its gravitational conversation with the cosmos has dimmed. This is the moment when the scientific debate shifts from explanation to wonder. Not fear, not alarm, wonder. On December 3rd, Parker Solar Probe enters the outskirts of the blackout region. For several hours its sensors detect plasma densities unusually low, quiet, smooth, almost serene. Communication packets are delayed. Clocks drift by tiny increments. Radio static thins. The solar wind's chaotic music softens into something nearly featureless. Inside, the void space behaves differently, not violently, but gently. As though turbulence is absorbed, not resisted. As though noise sinks rather than scatters. As though the object leaves behind an eddy of calm in the rushing river of the heliosphere. No one calls it a shield. No one calls it technology. They use gentler words, depression cavity region of reduced interference. But privately, some describe it more poetically as a wake of silence, the inverse of a turbulent trail. Imagine traveller walking through a field of tall grass and seeing a narrow path where the wind does not blow. A corridor of stillness moving with you. That is what Parker measures, a silent footprint drifting outward. As the void grows, another phenomenon appears, a rhythmic softening in surrounding background noise. A tiny dip every 19 seconds. Not a transmission, not a sound, a subtraction. The absence of interference appearing at precise intervals like breathing in reverse. The timing is familiar. The same interval that marked the object's thermal pulses. The same cycle buried in radar echoes and swans' mirrored flickers. The same rhythm that whispered through magnetic anomalies. Now it manifests not as energy, but as silence. A heartbeat made of absence. Researchers debate rigorously and quietly. They review cosmic sources that could mimic such rhythm. Pulsars number instrument loops, num processing errors. Each possibility dissolves under scrutiny. The rhythm remains solid, faint and impossibly steady. By December 4th, the blackout expands to nearly 1 million kilometers across. Radar becomes useless. Optics fail. Infrared arrays record only the background glow of dust drifting through the ecliptic. Photometry sees nothing but emptiness. Even Gaia's gravitational readings remain blank. But the object is not gone. It is simply travelling through a different state of visibility. A state where observation becomes an intrusion it no longer permits. Some astronomers propose that 3i Atlas has entered a low emission mode, conserving whatever internal energy was awakened during its perihelion. Others suggest that its surface has formed a metamaterial shell, capable of scattering incoming radiation in ways not yet understood. A few even speculate about an internal magnetic field restructuring itself into a configuration that bends surrounding plasma and weakens detection. None of these theories fully satisfy the data, but all share the same tone. This is not disappearance, it is transformation. On December 5th, the shape of the void shifts vaguely. Its edges begin to blur. Solar wind turbulence returns. Plasma density rises slowly. Background static strengthens. The region is thinning. And then, in a soft, nearly imperceptible moment, the blackout ends. One by one, instruments regain their ordinary sensitivity. The stars return to their usual clarity. Gravitational readings stabilize. The void dissolves like morning mist. But 3i Atlas does not reappear. It has simply moved beyond the range of detection, leaving behind a last faint trace, a repeating 19-second rhythm, lingering in the noise floor, carried not by light, not by heat, but by the memory of a pattern. Somewhere beyond the inner planets, the object drifts through a colder, quieter region of the solar system, one where even human curiosity becomes too faint to reach. Its trajectory still forecasts a crossing of the heliopause in late 2026. After that, it will leave the Sun behind, entirely returning to the interstellar dark from which it came. No one knows if it will reactivate when it touches the boundary of the heliosphere. No one knows if the rhythm will return. But those who watched its final measurable movements agree on one truth. It did not leave us. It simply stopped letting us follow. Tonight, traveller, imagine that silence, the last gentle echo, fading into the cosmic hum, a rhythm continuing somewhere beyond our reach, patient as a drifting snowflake, quiet as a distant thought. Imagine the object moving through dark space, unobserved but not lost, completing whatever sequence perihelion began. Some mysteries do not close, they continue quietly beyond the range of our senses. Sleep now, observer. The cosmos remembers even when it does not speak. And so, traveller, we arrive at the quiet edge of the story. This isn't an ending, only a soft resting place, the point where the journey dims and we listen to the silence between the stars. The path behind us glows faintly, and the path ahead disappears into a darkness older than memory. Tonight, 3 Atlas drifts somewhere beyond the inner planets, moving without urgency, without need for recognition. Its trajectory can still be drawn on paper, but its presence has dissolved into the background hum of the cosmos. What we witness, the heat blooming inside it, the strange reorientation, the impossible gain of mass, the echo that seemed to answer all of it remains recorded in our instruments, but unclaimed by any easy explanation. You and I, observer, watched quietly from our small world, and for a moment it felt as though something out there watched back. In that fragile connection between the seeker and the unknown, there is a kind of grace. We are small, yes, but not insignificant. The universe allows us to witness its mysteries, even when it refuses to explain them. As you rest tonight, let the unanswered questions become gentle companions rather than weights. Not everything must be solved. Some mysteries exist simply to remind us of wonder, to widen the space inside our thoughts, to show us how much beauty lives in the things we cannot name. So breathe slowly. Let the darkness feel soft. Let your thoughts drift like starlight across an empty orbit. The night is wide and the cosmos is patient. Stay curious, rest well, traveller. The universe will keep watch, and if this story found you tonight, you may stay for the next.